If I had to pick what I think is the most confusing thing in the NBA right now, I would say it's the Utah Jazz. On February 24th, they went on to beat the Lakers, and that gave them a crazy record of 26-6. At that time, a lot of people, including myself, thought that they were going to have a historic season and might even make it out the Western Conference. Well, last week wasn't exactly the best time to be a Jazz fan. First, they surprised everyone with their tremendous start, and now they're surprising us with back-to-back losses. So exactly how concerning is it that the Utah Jazz have lost 3 out of their last 4 games? That's what I'll be going over in this video. First, I'll be breaking down the Jazz's previous 4 games, and based on that, we'll decide whether or not this is concerning for the team's future. Alright, let's get started. First game that started this losing streak for the Jazz was when they versed the Miami Heat on the 26th of February. Obviously, the Heat ended up winning, and I think that was the statement to the rest of the league saying that they're officially back. Just like some of the other games, the problem which kinda made Utah fall short was their inability to stop the other team's star players. Jimmy Butler scored a season-high 33 points and Goran Dragic scored a crazy 26 points off the bench. And some other players also had a decent game, like Bam Adebayo putting up a double-double. It was a pretty intense game, but the Heat ended up coming on top in the end because they were able to make some big plays both defensively and offensively. So what exactly was it that made the Jazz fall short? Well, something that I've started noticing is that this Utah team isn't exactly the best in clutch time. Donovan Mitchell had 30 points, but missed 8 out of his 9 final shots, which would have made a huge difference. Also that night they didn't get the best performance out of Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson, and that made a lot of the offense fall on Mitchell alone, who is only human and can't drop 50 every night, even though he did do that in the playoffs. The Jazz also got out-rebounded that game 36-50, and they were somewhat below par with their 3-point shooting, scoring only 15 out of the 46 which they shot. Honestly, that night they just weren't feeling the game, and that happens with pretty much any team. But you got to also credit the Heat, because they played one of the best games of their season. We ran up on a team that really just outplayed us down the stretch, and they made plays when it mattered the most. That's what Mike Conley said to a reporter in a post-game interview, which goes to show what I mean even more. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with losing a game to last year's finalists, and they basically had nothing to worry about. The Jazz then went on to play their next game in a back-to-back, and they ended up beating the Orlando Magic 124-109. Honestly, there was nothing surprising about this game, and it kind of made it look like the Jazz had bounced back into their rhythm. Again, the leading scorer was Donovan Mitchell, who dropped 31 points. He had 5 3-pointers and dished out 6 assists as well, and the team had an overall successful night. There were 7 people who scored double digits, and this led the Jazz to their 12th win in the previous 14 games. One of the players who was really able to bounce back for the Jazz was Jordan Clarkson. The previous night, he only shot 4 out of 17, and basically was ice cold. But he came back the next night and dropped 18 points, so a win for him as well. There isn't really anything else for me to say, so we'll just go ahead and move on. The third game which the Jazz had in their road trip was against the New Orleans Pelicans, and they ended up losing 129-124. Now this was one of those games which had a lot of things to analyze. If you had a chance to watch a game, I'm sure you would have noticed that the Jazz looked like they weren't giving their full effort in the first 3 quarters. They were really sluggish and looked tired. It was in a way similar to the loss they had to the Miami Heat, because there was only a couple of scoring runs and defensive stands, but overall they didn't have the energy. Another thing which is worth mentioning is the way that Zion was playing. There was no one in the Jazz team that could guard him, and he went on to drop 26 points. It's similar to the situation with Jimmy Butler, because in both instances the Jazz couldn't guard the other team's superstar. I mean, come on, Zion dropped 15 points in the 3rd quarter alone. If you look at any of the games that Utah lost, it's never because of their bad offense or inability to score. It's their defense and rebounding every single time. Just to give you an idea, Bojan Bogdanovic had 31 points, while Gobert added 22, Donovan Mitchell chipped in with 21, and Jordan Clarkson added 20 of his own. They had 4 players who scored over 20 points and 6 players who scored more than 10, so it should be pretty clear what's holding them back. Rudy Gobert is a really good key defender, but one other guy needs to step up and also become a dominant force on that end of the floor. Looking at the whole thing, I think that the game was super close and it could have gone either way. But still, Utah had countless flaws, and losing to the 11th seed in the West wasn't exactly a bright moment. At this point, Jazz fans are slowly beginning to wonder what's going on with their team. Losing 2 out of 3 games is just a bump in the road, right? Well, things didn't exactly get better in their next game. On March 3rd, they went on to verse the Philadelphia 76ers, who were the first seed in the Eastern Conference, and again, they ended up losing 123-131 in overtime. There are a lot of people who think this is going to be this year's final matchup, and if that does end up happening, it's going to be one heck of a series. Alright, now back to the analysis. This game was also a super close one, and from the start it looked like the Jazz were going to be the winners. They even led by 13 points at some point. but obviously they couldn't hold on to it. In the last minute of the game, Utah was up by 3 when Joel Embiid pulled back a fadeaway 3 on Bogdanovic's head top and managed to make it. This forced overtime, and that's where the Jazz's lack of good defense kicked in again. They got outscored 5-13, and if you were able to watch the game, you would have noticed that Philadelphia basically ran the same play 3 times and was able to get 6 points without any trouble. The Jazz currently have the 28th clutch defense in their NBA, and considering how the NBA only has 30 points, that's pretty bad. Gobert is pretty much the thing that's holding this team's defense together, and when other teams start playing isolation ball with Joe Ingles and Bojan Bogdanovic, the Jazz are in trouble. Talking about Gobert, he's also been struggling with defense against elite offensive big men. Nikola Jokic is averaging 41 points per game against him in 2 matchups this season. Embiid just dropped 40 points on him. Anthony Davis averages just a tick below 30 points per game on Gobert across 3 matchups last season. Not a good sight. Right now it seems like this Jazz team isn't as perfect as everybody thought. So now that we've broken down the 4 games, let's go over the question of how concerning are these losses for Utah's future this year. Well, my personal take on this is that there are 2 ways to look at this. More optimistic view would be to think that all of those games were lost by a bucket or 2 and the Jazz are still in a great spot and ready to make a push at the title. Well, my own view is a little bit more disappointing. The Jazz obviously have a real weakness here with their defense and inability to guard elite offensive big men. The Heat had Bam Adebayo, the Pelicans had Zion, and the 76ers had Embiid. These guys are 3 of the best big men in the league right now, and they seem to be the kryptonite to Jazz's system. If they want to fix this up, Utah needs to change its defensive layout and find a new and more efficient way to guard teams like this. And if they don't, the chances of success in the postseason is going to decrease a lot. If you have a different opinion on this, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Well, that's pretty much it. I have a couple of other videos about the Utah Jazz which will pop up on the screen in a couple of seconds, so make sure to check them out as well. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to drop a like and subscribe so you can get access to all the videos as soon as they're released. Well, that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next video.